Chairman Wakey. Here. Alderman Gould. Absent. Alderman Lockmiller.
Here.
Alderman Nancy Parker Tice. Here.
We had a great processes. There's so much to do with the sustainability plan for him to get together. So that's kind of unfair that Eric, his team, to add that onto an already very full report. So that's one recommendation that was sending out. And I'll be helping to push that.
No report. Alderman Gould's online.
Hold on, skip, Jeff. Hey, Jeff, can you hear us? Nope. We can't hear you, though.
You can, I can hear you.
We can hear you
I can
now.
hear you now.
Okay. I have no report.
Anything to report?
I do not have anything to report.
Okay, thanks. Welcome. Nancy?
No report.
Okay, we'll move on to item 6, Department Commission reports. So we'll go Parks and Rec first.
All right, so good evening. We have a couple things for the Parks and Recreation Department for September. One is just an update on the pathway to Bridgeport and White. And I'm happy to say that the Public Works Department said that they'll start the pathway, they'll finish up the pathway next week. Some trash issues this week, short staff, so they're moving on that next week. And that will be finally done. So something that we've been working for a while on and very excited. The next thing is just we want to talk quickly about the storm damage policy for the city. And mainly because this is we've had a strange year of storms. And so we've noticed basically the policy states that after storms, we'll clear the streets, the sidewalks, parks, city-owned down tree limbs, and then basically the homeowners are responsible for private trees. And what's happened this past year is that we've had two pretty big storms, and then the last one a couple weeks ago just kind of hit a small section of town. And so, so the Parks and Rec Department, we're happy to do it. It's something that, we feel is important to do, but it's now almost an expectation. We got a call today that, hey, a limb fell down yesterday, and obviously we didn't have any storms. Like, I'll just put it on the curb and you'll come pick it up. And so I think the idea is we need to figure out what, if we should put on maybe a little bit stronger verbiage about what type of storm we'll come out for. If you want us to start going out for everything, we're happy to do that. I think we want to see where the Public Works Committee might be on this topic.
So I would, first of all, like to thank you for the 3 storms that you've cleared. I think these have been really unusual storms, and the third storm that only hit sort of the western section of Brentwood was, I mean, in that part of Brentwood, I think that one was worse than the first 2 storms. The one, it was private tree, but the tree that, I don't know if you saw the tree near
Yeah.
White and McKnight, but it was like their entire yard was upended. So I do like that. I guess I would look to you a little bit if this is just more than your staff can manage. Do you want to not do this? I mean, I think it's really a nice service when we have a big storm, and it's obviously a big storm, and it impacts everyone. So I do like that we did that. I don't think you should, when just a limb falls, it should not be the expectation that it's picked up. I think people need to put it in the bags and deal with it that way, or have it hauled off some different way. But these unusual storms, I think it's an amazing benefit that we have provided the citizens. And like I drive down McKnight and on the other side in Ladue, I still see lots of limbs and everything, and our city looks great. So thank you for that.
As far as time goes, just kind of, I mean, for both of those first couple storms, it took us a full, probably 6 working days to get everything clean. Usually the first day was spent primarily on street trees, and as we decided to move into private trees, you know, it takes a while because people take advantage of it, which is great. And not only our department, but I know at times Dan and his staff helped out as well too. So, you know, it's nice, that team effort there with Public Works as well. We're happy to do it. It does, as I mentioned, I think in the memo, it's put us behind, and we'll catch up, don't get me wrong. It's just, you know, the expectation I think should be that if we want to do that, then what we did was all hands on deck until it got cleared. And so mowing dropped a little bit, you know, all those type of things that we typically do on a day in, day out basis, got a little bit behind. And I think we're catching up. By the end of this week, we'll be caught back up again. So it's usually about a week and a half lag. But ultimately, we can do it. I think the tough thing, and I think this is where I'm coming from, is if we have maybe a specific in the policy that says X type of storm, and I don't know what that would be, because after that last storm, you know, there wasn't a clear indication that we should go out because it had only really hit York Village more than anything else. And again, we're happy to do it, but if it's, I wish I had a better answer of what we should say. And again, if we just want to say we'll come out anytime, we're happy to do that too.
Were you, during this storms, called into Brentwood Forest area to clear any?
Yeah, we were, and we cleared Brentwood Forest. I mean, it was kind of a tag team effort because they have their trees as well, but any street tree we went through and we cleared.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know how you would set a gauge for this.
That's the tough part.
I mean,
even
to
if
me,
you
it
try to-
sounds like all or nothing.
There's the cost of Davy trees too. And
Yeah.
I think this year, because of the number of storms, I thought you said you were close to exceeding that line item. Is that correct or not?
We're about, if at the last chance, I think about $30,000 just in storm removal. And again, the benefit of that is the first storm, I was in Brentwood at 3:30 driving around. Davy Tree was out by 4:45. And hopefully, you know, we cleared a lot of stuff before people wake up. And so that's kind of the benefit of having them be able to do that too. The second storm, they're already in Brentwood Forest, so it was like, yep, I already have a team coming. So, I mean, they're great about helping us with those type of things too.
So these are trees outside of our right-of-way. So are you going on to private property and
No,
clearing?
we are not, but anything they can drag to the street. I mean, they don't have to cut up, like yard waste, you have to cut up. We were getting branches about the size of the dais, and then we'd have to actually chop it up ourselves before we could even put it in the chipper. The other issue is that we only have one chipper because we only plan for the type of usage we normally do, so that slowed us down as well.
Yeah, it seems like we don't want to, I mean, if it's all as opposed to none, we don't want to get in a situation where anytime anybody has a big limb fall in their backyard for whatever reason, they're just dragging it out into the street and, you know, expecting that Brentwood's going to pick that up. I mean, I wonder if there's I don't know how you quantify what the storm damage is, but if the determination is made by Eric or Bola or the arborist or something like that, that this is a, you know, Brentwood citywide cleanup event, you know, and we publish that on social media or declare that or something, is that a way where we?
Yeah, I mean, the first two, like I said, the delay on the last one was because it was kind of that, well, it wasn't the whole city. I mean, the first two were citywide damage, and that was easy to make that call. It's, I think, the situation in the last storm, it really only hit a pocket of town, but it hit it hard.
But I think
No, go ahead.
maybe the policies should just give Eric that discretion, make that determination.
Yeah, Nancy?
And I'd also maybe add something that, to the policy that says that you'll do it for a certain number of days, period. Because I know there was an issue, and the city was great and went back and collected from one person, which expanded to everyone for an additional day. But I do think if you have that in the policy, it's there and we can point to it.
And maybe what I can do is, if so directed by the committee, I could work on a new policy based on the conversation we've had and bring it back to next month's meeting.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it, if that's what's needed.
Yeah, I mean, my only thought is, does that put undue pressure on Eric, where residents might be calling him and, saying, what do you mean this wasn't a severe storm? Like, look at this tree, and like,
Oh, that's already on Facebook.
Yeah,
I mean, that would be my only thought on it.
Sometimes that influences the decision
Right.
that the city makes. And that's not necessarily bad, it just causes Eric's staff to be behind a little bit more, but, it's a service.
Yeah. I have to say, it came up at the York Village neighborhood meeting, and there was a lot of appreciation for it. And I did actually talk about how other things would be delayed, but there was great appreciation for what the city has done this summer with these unusually large storms.
Okay. Any other comments or, all right, all those in favor of Eric writing that up and bringing it back to us?
Aye.
aye.
Great.
All right, Sustainability Commission, I think, is next, right?
Yes, yep. That's
So,
good
again,
optimized agenda, good job.
we have a number of things the commission wants to bring to the Public Works Committee, and then the first is the EV Readiness Ordinance. So we did have a couple representatives from Ameren, Marco Tipton, and then Sarah Martin from Electrify in Missouri, talk about EV Readiness Initiatives, and basically how EV ordinances are being designed to prepare communities for the electrification of vehicles, especially as we see the trend of more electric vehicles coming. So after the presentation, we discussed the commission, the need for the city to develop such a EV readiness ordinance. And we should be focused on single family, but also think we could look at the business sector as well as multifamily. So what was recommended was a motion was made to city proceed with EV ready space ordinances. And we'll bring it here for Public Works for your consideration.
Yeah, and so in board docs, there's the presentation that Suscon saw, and I would direct you to slide 6, which kind of shows the different EV capable, EV ready, and EV SE installed, kind of the different classifications that they're using, the nomenclature on this. Yeah, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you. Just for my knowledge, are these technologies kind of set, or are they ones that are still evolving? And what might be the ports needed, or the electrical panels and capacities needed now, still going to be the same for down the road? I mean, what I'm getting is from what you're recommending from this is that it's an incentive to try to, whether you have an EV vehicle or not, if you're doing major construction, think ahead and put it in there because of the trend of more EV vehicles.
The biggest thing Ameren's trying to get, especially with single family, is to get the electric port ready in garages, which is no more than a dryer type of plug. So the idea is if the city wants to move forward with this, is that in new construction, that would just be mandated that those would go into the garages. So in the future, if a homeowner wants to put in an EV charging station, the electric is already right there in the garage for them. And that's kind of Ameren's first big push right now, because that is the easiest way. And it also would do things like keep EV charging stations out of the right-of-way, which I know Dan is going to talk about here in a little bit, and things that the city probably doesn't want to engage in.
Okay. Yeah, the reason I asked is, when I did my house, we put in Cat 5 cable and everything else, and now that's sort of obsolete, right? So I just want to make sure, and that wasn't very long ago. So I want to make sure that if we're going to create a policy, that it's not something that becomes obsolete fairly quickly because we've now, the cable goes to something else, or the plug is something more than or different than just a standard dryer port. That's the only hesitation I'd have. I think it's a good idea to look toward the future, especially in building, to make sure things are ready for it, space is allowed for it, and that I get concerned about putting something in that then is obsolete quickly because things change.
Nancy?
So I'm not the expert, but I do have a slight answer. So and I'll give an anecdote. When we added onto our house, we did the EV ready option and had looks like a dryer plug. And lo and behold, about a year and a half later, my husband bought an electric car, and we didn't do the EV SE installed. He just has a huge cord that he plugs in, and it charges really slowly. But that's great. And then we had all the, it was capable in our electric panel. So I would. We're sort of a living example of that this actually works. And I think Alderman Gould makes a great point with the EVSE installed, that if that's that to me seems like a step way too far to put that in, but as long as it's capable or even ready, it seems like that would adjust better with the evolving technology of charging.
Yeah, Steve?
And we're only talking new construction, correct?
It'd be new construction or major, reconstruction. I think there's some definitions in there, and Ameren does have draft ordinances that we can start from as well, of what that definition is.
Because I know, are we talking if someone adds on some square footage to their house that they may then need to put in an EV garage?
I think that would be, how we write the ordinance.
Okay. Because I'd have concerns there, because a lot of, especially the older homes, may only have 100 amp service coming to their home. And that may be tapped out just with the current appliances that they have in there. So that would be a major expense if you've got to now stick in a 200 amp panel and run a meter and everything from the pole on in. That's just something, that would be a concern of mine.
The committee would indulge. I was just talking to Steve, as the person who does the inspection. You want to weigh in or not?
Typically, when code requirements come in later, we don't require people to take finished material off to install. A good example would be smoke detectors. If you're doing a major renovation in the house and you create a path that you could get from a basement to an attic, we require them to run AC smoke detectors. It probably would be a pretty good load on 100 amp service, especially now, everybody has air conditioning now. We do have a lot of electric water heaters and electric dryers and electric ranges in town that are running on 100 amp services. If you'd have, based on my knowledge of these EVs, that they don't pull 50 amps all the time. It tapers off as the batteries come up to full charge. So it may be for a short while there'd be a full load on it. But the code does account for what they define as incidental loads, to where you wouldn't have to add up the sum of all the breakers. That's not the way you set your demand. But other than that, it's one 2-pole 240 volt circuit, and it's dedicated. So I don't think it's a lot of money for a new home for what they're bringing here. The 50 amp would require 6 gauge wire. you're probably looking at $100 to $150 to run that circuit, I would say. Because they're just taking it to a disconnect and then dropping a plug out of that.
Well, I would just take my own home, for example. It's a 100 amp service. I got a detached garage. If I'm adding onto the house and all of a sudden now got to run a 220 dedicated line out to a detached garage for an EV, just because I've added on to my home, I mean, is that kind of what we're saying here, if possibly?
I think that's what the definition of significant modifications is.
I guess I would agree with the, I don't know that an addition, because, I mean, it's really in and of itself. It's not like you're doing just a gut rehab in a house where everything's coming out. I mean, if I was just adding, say, a bedroom onto a house, I probably, my own personal opinion, I would question the requirement for an electrical vehicle outlet based on that. Now, if you're doing a gut rehab, it could probably be hidden in there somewhere. As far as cost-wise, I don't know that it's that much of a cost improvement. I mean, in the case of a detached garage, that could require larger feeders out there to increase the load out there. I'm not sure if you're overhead or underground out to your garage, but that could be a requirement.
And I would think if we do direct them to go forward with developing these ordinances, those definitions would be in there. I mean, from my personal experience, we put a second story on my house, but you can't fit a car in the garage, so it would be stupid to put I think that would be in the definition of the new modification.
Okay.
I mean, I'm also in favor of the EV ready classification to Alderman Gould's point, because you don't want to actually install the charger itself, because I think he's absolutely right. 5 or 10 years from now, the charger is going to be different, but I would be very confident that the electricity is going to be basically the same. I mean, we're not going to be changing that.
No, the line to the plug could be changed out for
Right.
very inexpensively if the plugs change over time.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the thing is that on this, I mean, from the Sustainability Commission's opinion, it seems to be a no-brainer to move forward with new construction and really seeing if there is a commercial definition that could be done, especially with the redevelopment down in Brentwood bound. I think there'll be further discussion with staff, and thank goodness Whitney will be doing this, about the, modifications to current homes. But I think we could look at that as well as we bring an ordinance back to Public Works. Because I think it would come back to Public Works.
Yeah, I don't think we probably want to concern ourselves with multifamily, because I don't think we see anything on the horizon along those lines.
Should that be in the ordinance in case there is some multifamily being built? We don't know. I mean, we're going to tackle it. I don't know if any place is zoned that at the moment that would accommodate that. You all might.
Have a couple of apartments, so one would hope that in keeping up with the industry, that they would look to put something like that in. The hotel clearly has an EV charging station, so we know that's the trend going forward. But I think we could be proactive, put it all in, and then as each development comes, take another look at it. And
Yeah, and slide 8 shows some different cities, what they've done for residential, multifamily, and commercial, the different classifications. So I think staff is just looking for, guidance on if we do want them to start developing these ordinances, taking the Ameren examples and fleshing those out for our own purposes, and I guess direction from us of how to proceed.
Do you need more
Most of that.
direction? Have you gotten enough direction?
Do we need an official
Do we need a motion?
I mean, isn't this coming out of sustainability anyhow, so?
Sounds, we're good.
The recommendation was to proceed with,
Just want us to tag on?
catcher's mitt for Suscon.
And we'll bring the ordinance back to Public Works.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah, I
I
mean-
think the guidance we need to give is, say for single family, are we recommending EV ready space, which is the plug? Or is it just EV
Oh, it's gonna be Whitney.
capable?
It'll be Whitney.
You know,
What'd you say? Dan?
with the public safety, a lot of times we tell them, throw it all at us and we'll decide what
Right.
sticks. And so that's kind of the guidance I'd give here. Depending on what came out of sustainability,
And the good news is that there is examples out there. Ameren's assisting other municipalities in developing it. They are the ones who basically got the city's EV readiness ordinance put in place. So it's not like we're starting from scratch. We have examples out there to look at. And, with Whitney's leadership, I'm sure we'll bring something vital back to the committee. So I think we have enough.
Okay.
We're ready to go. The next was the Missouri Business Energy Efficiency Program. So Matt Firewig talked about the program, and it's basically an incentive program, as Alderman Wiggy said, for doing energy efficient upgrades for Ameren customers. And again, as the city does qualify as an Ameren customer. And the city has done this before. We got $47,209.63 check given to us when we did the renovations of the rec center. So I think what the motion was made by the Sustainability Commission was to explore doing some energy audits for the other buildings and moving forward, finding ways to participate in this program, even being able to maybe look at some retro backdating till March of 2019.
Yeah, so do you need anything from us to continue doing that?
Well, if we do an official energy audit, that would be funding. Now we have funding in the sustainability line of the budget, so we could work through that. So if we want to do an official energy audit of buildings, I think we need, since that's money, we need a motion, wouldn't we? I'm looking at you. You're my boss.
If we did audits, you would put out an RFP or an RFQ, right, for,
RFQ.
no, I think they outsource it
Yeah, they
according to
do.
Farwig.
Yeah.
Well,
Sounds good?
do we need a motion to direct him to do that, or no? Okay,
Yeah, we're
great,
good.
good.
Whitney will do it too. Last was the Green Dining Alliance, and so we continue our session on the GDA. And the big thing is the commission wanted to see if the city would be willing to help cover some of the cost. Restaurants have to pay $250 that first year, which covers an audit that the GDA does, and then it's $200 in subsequent years. And the commission made a recommendation to bring to Public Works to see if the city would reduce business licenses by $200 for restaurants who do participate in the GDA.
Yeah, Steve?
that would be annually. So the $200,
Yep.
it would go for, so it'd just be a $50 annual fee for them.
Well, it'd be $50 for first year and then cover their participation in the GDA every subsequent year.
Okay.
Yeah, Nancy?
How much is the, what do they pay the city every year?
I'm going to look at Whitney for that one.
Is there a range? Are we like at least $200? Like, we're not gonna give somebody more money than they are paying us, are we?
I mean, technically, if we go this route, if we're saying we'll reduce it by, and their business license is only 150, well, then they would get a free business license that year and not get the full $200 from the city. Would be the way I understand the recommendation. To the GDA.
Yeah.
Vola, I can't hear you if,
Sorry.
okay.
We would like to do a little bit of analysis. We don't have that many restaurants, so it should be something we could quickly do a turnaround on and tell you that. Ultimately, it still looks like something good to do.
Yeah.
No, I agree. Maybe we should do it anyway, but I would be, just make sure we know what kind of, it's not that, knowing that we have 20 or 30 restaurants, it's not that much revenue we'd be losing, so.
Right.
I'll work with Whitney on that, and I'll bring that back next Public Works Committee.
But I would say go ahead and
Go ahead and start.
start fleshing it out, assuming that, you know, the licenses are at least $200.
Okay.
And if not, then we can talk about that. But yes, Steve?
In subsequent years, who audits this to make sure that restaurants are, does the Green Alliance go out?
Yeah,
and
the GDA actually does make sure that people are following their guidelines every year. So you have to basically, they'll come out and kind of do a walk through the restaurant and make sure that they're following everything that they're supposed to be doing.
How do we get that communication then to know how to bill?
Basically, they'll get a renewal for the GDA, and so we would just need to see that renewal as we do their business license.
All right.
I mean, personally, I think we will save money on this just from the amount of trash that we don't have to pick up from residents that are getting takeout from those 20 restaurants. So, you know, because their first thing is like no styrofoam, right? So that's all that we're picking up and those kind of things. And I think this is a great one.
Bring that back next month.
Thanks, Eric. All right.
I
Yeah,
like a
yes,
question.
Steve.
Going back to Eric's report, there was something under some presentation. Are we not doing that? Dog park and,
When we started that presentation in July, and we thought we had some different, you know, I had a lot of stuff myself, and with Alderman Gould not being here, we thought maybe it'd be better to do next month.
okay.
That's okay with the committee. Sorry, I forgot to mention that.
Tell me that now. I'm just kidding.
Okay, let's move on to planning and development.
I wanted to provide an update on the review of solar panels by staff instead of ARB. We have had discussions with the city attorney, and because the Board of Aldermen gave the Architectural Review Board the duty to review residential exterior modifications, that's why it's been reviewed there. They felt it was important that the Architectural Review Board have a written policy for staff of what staff could review. And if it doesn't agree with that, or staff doesn't feel like it meets with those requirements, it would then be referred back to them. So it doesn't take an ordinance by the board to make that policy, so we will proceed with that in the upcoming meetings.
So what, will we see this anymore, or it'll just stop happening? I mean, will there be anything that the board has to vote on for this at all?
It doesn't have to be voted on the board, it's just a policy that the Architectural Review Board will have to vote on.
Okay.
But I will be updating the Board of Aldermen and here with that policy in the coming weeks, yeah.
Fantastic. Anybody? All right, Public Works?
Okay. One of the things we already covered was the Bridgeport White Trail, so that one, as Eric mentioned, we'll be working on it next week. What we did do, since we were shorthanded this week, was to do the concrete pad just outside by the library, so that'll be for the bike rack. That was from Sustainability Committee, or Commission, rather. So we're going to let that cure over the weekend, and then we'll put the anchor bolts in and get that mounted, as well as an actual hoop that's for the bike rack itself. So if you wanted to store a bike there, not necessarily work on it, you could do that as well. Jumping back up to Rosalie, I don't know if you have any questions on that, but I did get a call yesterday. We set up a meeting with MoDOT. So on the 16th, which is next week, we'll have a pre-construction meeting with Krupp Construction and MoDOT. And then we'll be able to give you some sort of schedule as to when Krupp would actually be in here doing the sidewalk and the street lighting project. Fred Luth, I included in your agenda packet. There's a letter from Luth. They sent it to everybody that would be impacted. And for us, it's City Hall. as well as the post office, and then going up the alley, up the other streets. So if you notice anything in the neighborhood, it's that they're doing preliminary work. They're trying to find utilities so that they can put in their gravity sewer, and if there's a service line that needs to be adjusted, they've identified it. So that's what they're doing now. MSD still has to do an open house. So sometime in September, there'll be an open house. They think it'll be virtual like they've done before. And then if residents or the board or anyone has questions, you can call in and ask questions. And then sometime in October is when they think that Fred Luth and Sons would actually start digging and doing actual work. And they're actually gonna start down at this end because this is the downstream end. So just outside the north stairwell here, there's that flower area that's on top of a manhole. That manhole feeds into a large box culvert that goes through the parking lot. So they'll start there and go north up through the alley, past the post office, and continue north past the Starbucks and until they tie in Bridgeport, White, and Rosalie. So that's gonna take them months and months of work. And then the only other thing I had was Vibratech contacted me. They're the sub-consultant for MSD, and they do an inspection of buildings before they actually have Luth do the construction. So on the 22nd of September, I'll be meeting with them, and we'll go through this building. They'll go in the basement, take pictures on the outside. That way, if there's a claim later, you know, some concrete's cracked or something's damaged, you know, parking lot wise or whatever, we'll have a before and an after to be able to do something with. So, and then the only other thing I didn't put in here was the street project. I'm sure you've seen Byrne and Jones working. They completed Brentwood, they completed Strassner, we did the Park Ridge Alley. Right now they're over in Hanley Industrial over by the Brentwood School District. They'll be tearing out that concrete and putting new concrete in, and then finishing up the rest of the project, you know, in the next month or so. So that's it.
So Dan, on the bike repair station, you said you already laid the pad and then,
If you go out there now, the concrete's green. It was just poured today. You know, they did a couple lifts. It's kind of a, I guess like a half, not even a half, like a quarter circle that's adjacent. It's basically where the old bike rack is, if you remember where that is. So if you entered the library, it would be to your right, like kind of around the corner. It's on that, would it be the east side of the building.
okay, and then you just have to install it and.
Yeah, we're gonna let it cure over the weekend. You know, typically you'll wait, say, you know, 48 hours or so for that to cure. You know, we could actually wait, you know, 5 or 7 days, but I don't think it's that critical. You know, it's only a 4-inch thick slab. As long as it cures over the weekend, then we can machine the holes in there and put the anchor sleeves and bolt it together.
Okay, so we're a couple weeks out from having that installed then.
Oh, I'm sure it'll be done next week, because it's real simple. It's like most of the mechanism is assembled now in the shop. It's just a matter of putting that flange there and then marking, because I want to dry fit it, figure out what angle it works best, because I don't want to put it too tight against where the bike rack is, and then if you're trying to work on your bike, you're hitting against something else. So we're going to figure out what best angle it fits and get it done.
Yeah, Steve?
Is this year pretty much wrapping up all the asphalt street repairs?
The asphalt part's done of the contractor's work. We still have the concrete jobs left.
I'm talking about,
which-
we've had like a 5-year program.
Yeah, there's a few that we've identified that we'll put on the list. You know, like one in Hanley Industrial we couldn't do. It would be closer to like the police. That has like some asphalt to it. And then maybe Evans. I'm trying to figure out if we own that. So the section of Evans would be to the east of Brentwood Boulevard. It actually goes into the villas. So it's between that Joseph White building and like where Dickey's used to be, that turn that you make. That was an actual street at one time. And the villas asked me, are we going to pave it? Because they knew we paved next to the YMCA up to the villas entrance off of Urban. And I was like, I don't even know that we've ever done it.
Is your question, have we completed all streets? It's always ongoing.
Yeah.
It'll never be complete.
Well, where I was going with this is, you know, when you first started doing this, Dan, you were using a new type of sealant instead of the asphalt. And I
Yeah,
was
for
just
the
wondering how
MAQS.
the first streets you've done, how that's held up.
It's held
compared
up
to
well.
asphalt.
Yeah, because Madge was one of them that we had the water company seal after we had done a mill and overlay, and then they cut through it and put the new water main in. And we have to go back and crack seal that seam where, you know, the ditch
Right.
was, but so far that sealant's held up really well.
Good.
And we do have sealants in this year's budget as well as in next year's and the year after. It's a 5-year. Typically, we'll go like 5 years after a mill and overlay, and then we'll seal it. You know, we're off kilter now because we didn't do as many streets and then COVID. So I'd say we're pushing 7 years and sealing them, and you know, it helps. You know, it's a lot better because it's applied uniformly and it's a little bit thicker than what we can do with our machine.
Great.
So, and we may have to go back on some streets where they've had multiple main breaks and stuff like that. I mean,
Sure.
to Bola's point, I don't think you're ever going to be done because there's going to be some utility cut or damage. Like Rosalie's one of those. I think after this job is done and after MSD is done, we might have to mill and overlay.
Well, the asphalt material we were using, I mean, you had pretty well thought it would be have longer lasting life than typical asphalt. And
Right, and we did do like Wrenwood, so if you drive on Wrenwood, like all the way up to like Swallow and closer to Eager, that's all been sealed and that still looks fine. It's not peeled up or anything.
Good, thanks.
Yep.
Nancy, Jeff, any other questions for Dan?
No, I'll just add, I think that the asphalt that's been done this year looks great, so thank you.
Thanks. Oh, yeah, and they did the park too. So if you go down to Brentwood Park, that parking lot and that trail system has been improved with new asphalt.
Thanks, Dan.
Yep.
All right, move on to item 7A, old business, the permit and inspection analysis, continuation.
Okay. I can handle this. What I did do was, based on what we did with sewer lateral, I used a similar table, so we would look at the comparators, you know, our peers that we use for all of our comparisons. So the table has like building costs or building permit costs. So some of these comparators will charge like a processing fee or administration fee, and then they'll also charge like a cost per $1,000 of construction costs. So like for us, it's $6 per thousand. For Baldwin, it's $6 per thousand. Some of them also include like a minimum. So if you're not doing something very expensive, at the very least, with Baldwin, you would pay $75. Say it's, you know, only $1,000 worth of work. Well, they're not going to let you get by with just $6. And then like Chesterfield, I couldn't figure out theirs. They do their MEP services, which would be mechanical, electrical, plumbing, through St. Louis County. So until you fill something out with St. Louis County with what your job size is and that, they can't really project what the costs are. Clayton, you know, there's a $35 application fee, $125 minimum for costs equal to or less than $18,500. And then if it's more than that $18,500, well, then it's $6.80 per thousand. So I went through and did that for each of the comparators. And then I also looked at like building permit inspection fees. Some of the comparators will put that fee in with the actual building permit cost. Others will actually charge you a la carte. So once you pay the building permit cost, if the inspector goes out and does inspection, well, then now you're being charged an inspection fee. In the case of like Baldwin, it's $50 per inspection. You know, there's a few others that would charge you separately, like Ellisville, it's $55. For us, I believe Whitney said it's $25. And then the last thing I looked at, I know we only talked about like fees and penalties at the last Public Works, but I also included a series of columns that would be occupancy permits, because I wanted to see, it's like, well, what do we charge with respect to our comparators? So put all that together in a table. There's a memo where we kind of call out like the different groups that I just mentioned. One of them that's kind of unique would be like Maryland Heights. They have a minimum application fee, and then they use a multiplier. Instead of like $6 per thousand or, you know, $7 per thousand, they actually say like if it's an interior alteration or renovation, you multiply the construction cost by 0.0025. If it's some other type of project that isn't one of those, then it's 0.0045 times whatever the value is. So there's a few differences. Like I said, if you look at the different comparators, and then Whitney had a good idea that what would happen if you had an example. So that's why there's that graph at the end of the memo. Say we were to do a hypothetical project that's a $50,000 renovation of a single family home, using what we did know or what we could find out. Like some of these, like Maplewood and Chesterfield, as I mentioned, I can't figure out theirs because of the county. You know, if I do some more digging, maybe I can. Webster, I couldn't really figure out those, even though I looked at the code. Theirs had a $30 application fee, so that's why that bar is so short. It's not the true cost of that one, so you can kind of throw it out. You know, I could have turned those rows off, but wanted to leave them on there anyways. But if you look at Brentwood on that last graph, the projected building permit fee for the hypothetical $50,000 example, we would be at, say, 325, and then Baldwin just right around 300. But there's several that would be above us, so like Clayton's would be higher, say like 375. Creve Coeur would be just a little bit above us. De Pere, Ellisville would be less. Frontenac significantly more, and then so on and so forth. So whenever you take that list of values and do the median, it's like 275. So if we're at 325 for that hypothetical project and the median's 275, we're not really much greater than that. So what that kind of tells me is that I don't think that our costs are too low. I don't think they're too high. I think they're probably where they need to be. You know, that's just from a high-level review of this. And then I don't know if you have specific questions about any of the other information that's in there. The one thing I wanted to point out with occupancy permits that we don't have is that, you know, we charge $45. And then if the planning group has to go out 2 times, 4 times, 5 times, it's just the $45 is my understanding. Some of our comparators, they'll give you the initial inspection and a re-inspection for the flat amount, but then any of the subsequent visits, like if it's visit number 13 or visit number 3, it would be a flat rate. For example, which one is it? Baldwin, it's $25 for subsequent re-inspections. So they'll give you the initial inspection, the re-inspection, but the 3rd, 4th, 5th, whatever attempt it is for you to get this right, before the occupancy permit's issued, it's $25. And there's several others that do that as well. Clayton does it, a couple others I've seen in here. Some were like silent. It didn't say that they did it. It just said the initial and the re-inspections X dollars. I'm assuming that if it's more than those two, that then it would be some sort of fee, but I just didn't see it in there. I don't know if you'd like us to explore that. Maybe that would be more efficient use of planning's time if the person could get it right in the 1st or 2nd attempt instead of chasing them out there 3, 4, 5 times. Because I have seen, like in Steve's scorecard, where the failure rates have increased for whatever reason in 2021 versus 2020.
Well, yeah, I would be in support of that. When I looked through this, it did seem like our occupancy permit application was a little lower than many of our comparator cities, and the fact that there's no reinspection fee, like, and they could just keep coming back and coming back for $45 seems highly generous. And even if it's a couple times, the staff should be supported for their time, paid for their time. So maybe there's a flat fee, and then you get 1 reinspection, and then after that, that'd be my thought. But
I'd agree with that, and I'd agree to allow the staff to, using this data now, you know, maybe look at what areas we need to increase. As far as, you know, next year's budget.
Yeah, because what we could do is like we did with sewer lateral, where we kind of find that sweet spot like we did there, where we originally had no ceiling, then we did $7,250, still needed to make up ground. So then when we did the graph, it looked like we needed to be at 3,500 to keep that program balanced. So I'm thinking you could do this where you graph it, you know, figure out where that best fit line is, and then it's like, well, we should be at X, whatever X is. If we're at 45, maybe it goes to 60, I don't know, until you do the analysis.
Yeah, Steve?
Well, when, you know, when Eric comes to us with his new set of fees, he's actually, you know, he's gone and done this type of research to see what the competitors are doing, to see where he can, you know, put his cost in there and still be competitive. I mean, I'd probably look at doing the same thing here, having planning and development go through and see what areas compared to our surrounding municipalities, you can increase those fees.
That's what we used to do, and so I think that's a good direction, that we need to continue to do that. So when Dan and Whitney come back, they will come back to Public Works Committee with a recommendation.
Yep. And would you want to include an initial and a reinspection, and then say it's the third, fourth, then we'll say whatever that quantity is? I mean, we'll make it part of the analysis.
Or
I know
the
some
third
of
and the
them,
fourth and subsequent
Right.
have an additional inspection fee, right? I mean,
Exactly.
Yep.
Correct.
the
Yeah.
intent of this was to stop the reinspection,
Right.
the endless
Right.
re-inspections.
So potentially you get one, or maybe you don't even get one. I don't know what you get. So you get two. You get one, the original
Then the
inspection
re-
plus a
right.
re-inspection, and then charge every time after that would be what I think, but,
A good incentive.
yeah.
okay, yeah, we'll break the table out just to analyze that and then come up with some sort of recommendation for the next round.
So Dan, can I ask a question? So like Chesterfield, their MAP services through St. Louis County, so that's mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. Does that mean, and Whitney might know the answer here, but does that mean their building permit is reviewed by the county, the overall building permit, or does Chesterfield do that review?
Yeah, whenever I went to their website, if you click on Chesterfield's, it takes you all the way to the county. So you have to submit your plans and everything to the county so that then they could tell you, hey, on your $50,000 renovation, we're going to charge you X dollars.
But that's for the entire new build building and design and everything, or is it just mechanical systems, electrical, and plumbing?
It was actually everything. So it's like new buildings. So like if it's commercial, if it's residential, it's like anything that you would put in an application. It was kind of like with ours with MyGov, except whenever you click on the link, everything, you had to say like how many square feet, you know, what exactly you're building or doing, you know, if it's a new roof, if it's whatever it is, it's like there's check boxes for all that stuff. I mean, I could call the county and ask, you know, more specifically, like if we did the hypothetical, it's like, well, where would that actually land? You know, if it's a kitchen, bathroom, reno that's 50 grand, what in theory would you charge me? You know,
Yeah, I mean, that kind of goes back to my, and I know maybe I'm going off on a tangent here, but, you know, my concern that when we get a lot of new development as part of Brentwood Bound, you know, Steve was telling us that, you know, you're up at the hotel every day. That's a huge, complex project. And is that going to overwhelm our staff of 6 people? You know, we have a couple of those going at one time, and we're also trying to do residential and occupancy and code enforcement. I mean, that's the nut of my concern. I think the re-inspection fees is a good way to reduce the workload by, you know, taking care of the ticky-tack kind of stuff, but, you know, I still have that concern out there.
Yeah, I kind of share it, mainly just on the commercial end. I still would really like to stay in control of our residential
Agree.
builds here, and that gives us the leeway to do things like with the EV and that type of thing. But I could see at least maybe, I don't know, testing out the county on taking over some of the commercial aspects, like some of the things they do for us now. Whenever we're blowing something up, I guess, which is a rare occasion. But, and, you know, if it doesn't pan out, then maybe we do a contractor for something like that. But I wish I had that bar chart in here that,
If you open it up. Another tab on the top.
yeah, but there was something else where our comparables, it showed exactly what the county does for our comparables. Yeah.
That's not in this particular agenda packet, it's in a couple of meetings
Yeah, it
ago.
was a couple of meetings back, and I was trying to find it again, but to kind of see how maybe Maplewood and Richmond Heights, what they do commercially and what they do and what they keep in-house residentially. So, I mean,
I think we're in complete agreement on residential. I mean, the stormwater ordinance, now the EV readiness. I mean, there's too many reasons we don't want to give that up. In complete agreement on that. It just seems like with potentially a huge slug of commercial development, are we going to be ready for it? Are we staffed for it? Is, you know, hiring Gonzalez to do a bunch of workforce, is that a cost-efficient way of doing that? Or is it worth giving off to a bigger entity that can absorb the additional work?
We do appreciate this and are open to the idea of having a St. Louis County. I just wanted to make the point that I Steve is the acting chief building official, and we only have him part-time. We are actively interviewing and recruiting, so I would like to have his replacement full-time and to help us make that determination before we move too far ahead in that. Just to get his determination. Some of the people that we've interviewed do permit review for larger commercial properties, and he may feel that he can handle it and would, or we can just add another staff person. I would just like to have that kind of feedback from him, whoever that might be. And hopefully we'll have that in place soon. So, yeah.
That's fair.
Okay.
I would say the other thing is, we've talked about some additional metrics, like, Steve brought a lot of information here, just the number of permits we have, kind of the backlog and what are in review. And I think we're going to start including that and go to a monthly cadence on the number of inspections instead of every weekly report. I think that's a valid view. And again, that way we can start kind of seeing if we're building a big backlog. And I think that's a fair approach too.
So we can put this on the agenda going forward, and Whitney can say, we filled the position, we're still in the process, we're looking at it. So that way it won't drop off our radar.
Okay.
Alderman Gould has.
Yeah, Jeff?
Yeah, I just want to make sure, I mean, so I agree with the conversation, but I think what this item is about analyzing the fees, right? They're connected subjects, but this was just focused on the fees, right?
Started that way. I think I took it in a weird tangent.
Yeah. It did start that way, and that is something we can continue now.
Okay, no, I think as it relates to the fees, I appreciate the data that we have, and it does seem to be that we're not overcharging and we're not undercharging. We're sort of right there in a good place. So if we were to spend any of staff's time, my recommendation would be to mitigate some of the abuse of the re-inspections. I think that's a very good hole, identified a very good potential hole that we have. So that would be my recommendation on it.
I think that's the direction we're going with, right?
We asked if Steve had something. Did you have something to add, Steve?
No, if you have any questions on the plan review part, or if you have any questions on how to navigate what I gave you, I can. Real quick, one thing that's not included in there, Whitney and I were talking before the meeting, and she had asked the question of how many applications do we get per day on average? And in the time that I had, I just went back 10 days, and we, in those 10 days, we're averaging 8 applications per day. Now, these run the gamut of all of the permits that we take, so it's not like we're getting 8 building permit projects that do require more time in the review process than that. Being with the way things are going, I think we're probably ahead of last year on the number of permits issued. So and going forward with the number of contractors that are registering daily, I think it's going to be a busy fall. Because they typically don't register or renew until they have a permit, until they have a job in the city.
Can you, on a typical day, how many inspections do you do?
Me personally or the department?
Well, both.
Probably, I'd say on average,
Back when you were full-time.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
When you were full-time,
yeah.
Well, yeah.
post-retirement.
Really.
I was mostly handling the problems. I didn't do all that many inspections. For whatever reason, RJ really scheduled himself for a lot when he was here. Scott's probably averaging over 10 a day. As far as housing goes, they're probably running 4 to 8 per day. And then, you know, if there's, if any of them has a snag or gets behind or whatever, I'll pick up enough to get them back on schedule. But that being said, the days when I'm here now, I usually have a list of other things that need to be addressed than, other than inspections.
So in preparation or in reacting to the workload and the discussion that we've been having with Whitney and Ronnie, there is an expectation that there will be a request for new positions in the 2022 budget to help manage the workload and the backlog from a plan review perspective and a fire marshal perspective. So, and I've asked for supporting data to help the board understand why there's a need for that. So at least preliminarily, there are 2 positions that will be coming from both departments, total, 1 each, in the 2022 proposed budget.
And, Bull, if I could add to that, I know we had talked and you had asked me what I told you was that I needed a plan reviewer. I think I'd probably like to qualify that a little bit and say I think we'd be better served with a senior level multi-inspector.
Oh, you're changing it.
Who could do both. And I'm sorry, but that was,
And this is the time to do so.
yeah, it seems like it would be a better fit because we would have somebody who, if there wasn't any plan review to do, could do inspections.
Okay.
Could do construction inspections.
Multi.
It's a trade. I mean, Scott's qualified as in plan review, so we'd still have technically maybe a full-time plan reviewer and a full-time inspector for construction. I guess that being said, if anybody has any questions on the other stuff that,
Down and analyze.
okay, it probably next meeting would be better for the questions.
It's gonna be great. I'm gonna read it to my kids.
Yeah, I mean, typically, real quick, if, in the review step column on, say, let's, just go to page 6. The review step is the 5th column over. There are different explanations for what review step we're in. Like the first one at 2501 Anna Lee, it's application building new residential, and there are items required. Typically, that means it's been looked at. We're requesting items required. Usually means we're requesting more information. That the information wasn't in there. Things like if you see the next page, the second one says complete building subcontractor permits. That typically, even though the status is still in review, the review step means that it's been issued. All of the rough inspections have been done, and this is just a reminder that all of the subcontractors have to be finalized before the building permit can be finalized. You want to jump ahead to an occupancy permit. Call it page 17. All of these here this thing was basically a snapshot. It was done on September 1st. Obviously, these numbers are all different now, but the program keeps track of these in real time, so every day it updates. You'll see that all of them are at the issue certificate of occupancy and review step. That means they've been inspected, they're approved for occupancy, and we're waiting for the tenant to come in for the occupancy permit itself. Unfortunately, it doesn't leave, the status does not leave the review status until that's done because we can't final it until that point. So like 96 out of those 169 plans that were in review are basically done. We're waiting for the tenant to come in and do the last step.
When you're like down, 4 down where it says Villas at Brentwood, it's 292 days, and that's because it's been inspected that the tenant never came in and got an occupancy permit? Am I,
That's correct. And they run so many that are vacant. I mean, when they get a move out, they'll have it done. They are better than most about having their tenants do it because they require a copy after they get it at the office before they're permitted to move in. That's just, it holds them until they're either archived or we force archive them. They're gonna stay in there. But there's a lot, they have a lot in here, the Villas does.
but I mean, does it like skew, I don't even know how to ask this question, but does it skew any of these statistics? When you're saying how long things are?
Only in the sense that it raises the number, and it makes it look like they're waiting for a review, but they're not. Our work's been done, and we're waiting for them to send a tenant up here.
So it's nothing like that we've held up? It's
No.
in their ballpark?
We have not held it up. We typically get to theirs at least within 48 hours of their request. It doesn't, we're kind of fighting through that a little bit because we had to do some modifications to the plan because MyGov draws the locations from the tax records. Their individual departments are not listed as individual locations. So we went in there and added, so we could keep track of what was issued and when and keep them separated. So we went in there and added all their apartment numbers so that the location manager module that's in there would know where to go. Otherwise, and what happens is if you go to try to edit it without it being in there as saved as a location, it just changes the number. So you kind of lose the last one because you've just updated it to the one you're doing right now. RJ worked on that for quite a while to get all those in there. We don't usually have that trouble with residential properties because they have their own taxing address, so.
So in that case of the 292 days, so we think that means that's a vacant thing at the
Yes.
villas, and
Yeah.
they're just waiting for somebody to rent it by or whatever they do
Yes.
up there.
I'm not sure what their vacant rate is, but that one is, I tried to, let's see, I sorted these. They didn't go by time. That one, that's particularly long. There usually aren't that long there. Yeah.
Any other questions for Steve? Okay, well, thanks for putting this together.
Oh, thank you. You're welcome.
Okay, we'll move into item 8, new business, Memorial Park Bridge replacement.
Yeah, I think I'll make this fairly quick. So during the budget process, when we talked about the bridge, we talked to a number of bridge companies who said it could be a turnkey operation, span, dimensions. They could pre-manufacture to come in and support it. When we got back to them, there's multiple other issues. The age of our current bridge, primarily it being in the floodplain, things like that. So we need to get some engineering drawings done, as well as doing some core samples, make sure everything is going to be safe as we put up this new pedestrian bridge, which makes perfect sense. Horner Schifrin's, our on-call engineer, can do this, and so we'd like just to move the money from putting in the bridge to doing the specs this year, and then we'll put in the bridge next year.
Motion to reallocate the funds to the design by Horner and Schifrin of the Memorial Park Bridge.
Second.
Second.
All right, any questions or conversation? The bridge last until next year?
Yeah, I mean, We have a few years, to be completely honest, but in the same right, you know, we see it starting to wear, so we don't want to, we want to make sure we get it done in a timely manner.
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Right.
Great.
Thank you.
All right, back to electric vehicles. I am loving this. This is like great.
Well, I know we talked about some of this previously, so I won't bore you with it, but the memo that I put together was just twofold. You know, one, to look at what some other communities did, and then also to kind of highlight some of the issues that might come about without having some sort of guidelines in place. So we were told that there was a particular charger in Maplewood, which you see the photo of. That particular one is in street right away. It's not a public, or it's a public street, it's not a private street. So the rationale for them allowing it, they made the person sign a hold harmless agreement, but the home was built in 1914. You know, back then, of course, there were probably very few cars. This home does not have a curb cut. You know, they could have, I guess, directed the person to build a driveway and then had the charger on private property. Instead, it's right here by the curb. I see a lot of issues with allowing that. One, you know, who gets to use it? If it's not locked up, it's in public right away. Anybody could hook onto it. Two, what happens if the charger's on the driver's side and not the passenger side? Are you going to park the car backwards, you know, so to speak? It's like you're pointed the wrong direction of traffic. Otherwise, you're going to have the cord wrapped around either the back or the front, sticking out on the driver's side. That could be a hazard. You know, if you're plowing snow, you're going to sling snow against this thing. If a street tree lands on it, who's responsible for fixing it? I just see a lot of issues with allowing something like that, so I give that a thumbs down. I would not want that here at all. The two communities that actually do have ordinances, Richmond Heights actually passed one, so there's a copy of that in your agenda item packet. And City of St. Louis passed one, but it doesn't take effect until January of 2022. And both of those actually address new construction as well as multifamily. If you look at the multifamily, those actually call out how many parking stalls would be EV ready. So in the case of Richmond Heights, it says if you're building, you know, townhomes, apartment complex, whatever, and you had total number of parking spaces in the range of 1 to 2, or 1 to 4 spaces rather, the minimum number of EV ready spaces would be 1. And then if you had a range of 5 to 10 spaces for parking, minimum number of EV spaces 2. And then if it's 11 or more spaces, then it's 20% of the spaces need to be dedicated as EV ready spaces. So I didn't know if you wanted us to kind of model after Richmond Heights. You know, again, it has single family and like new construction. That would be like one ordinance, and then the other would pertain to multifamily. And then somehow, you know, we could incorporate in here, you know, that it's not allowed on public rights of way. And then the thing that I thought with multifamily is, well, in the case of Brentwood Forest, say there's something built in Brentwood bound that's similar to that, that's 4 or more units connected, where would this thing go? Because like Brentwood Forest doesn't have a garage, so is this thing going to be a charger that's stuck out on private property so that one of these parking spaces, those people can use it? I don't know. It's something we'll have to explore.
Yeah, Steve?
I guess if somebody built multifamily down in Brentwood bound, they would probably have a parking garage.
I would think so.
Or I would hope we would have a parking garage, because I don't know where we're going to put all these cars. So that would kind of solve its own problem there.
And I think this is what we talked about earlier tonight, you know, with the ordinance on new build residential, major modification, multifamily, and commercial. In terms of like the pole, I think we have to come up with a solution on that, because, you know, in Ward 2 especially, nobody can park in their garage. They're too small. So you get one car in the driveway and one on the street. And in 10 years, they're both going to be electric vehicles. So, you know, if we're not allowing residents to put a pole in the right of way or something like that, then they're just going to drag an electric cord from the garage across the sidewalk and hook their car up to it, right? Which doesn't sound like a tenable solution either.
But I think our ordinance requires that every dwelling have off-street parking.
Yeah, that I don't know. I know there's a few streets like Moritz and Bridgeport. There's homes that don't have a driveway at all on those streets, like going
We'd have to
west of
confirm
Brentwood
that.
Boulevard. because we've had to ask people to move multiple times when we've repaved those streets because they park in the street. And I'm like, we're gonna have to park a block over. We'll let you know when we're done, but
I remember when we granted unmadged the guy the disabled parking because that was a shared driveway
and then it was removed.
and it was removed. But I believe at that time Lisa mentioned that it is a requirement that off-street parking, you may want to check into that, is made available.
Yeah.
But the
every
reality
dwelling.
is, if you drive around Brentwood, there are a lot of cars parked on the street, right? So you might have one car parking in a driveway, off-street parking, but, you know, the reality is a lot of these homes have multiple cars. And so what are we gonna do about that? And I'm glad we're talking about this, because this is gonna be a thorny problem. I hadn't even thought about the snow aspect, and that's spot on.
Well, then, yeah, and then you're also limiting parking, because now what that individual's going to think that is his spot in front of his home because he's got an EV charger there. There's gonna be a lot of unhappy campers with that.
Yeah, I think that's a challenge as well.
But I'm thinking in a driveway, you know, if you've got a driveway, I mean, that's the yin and the yang of electric vehicles opposed to gas. You're just gonna have to make that accommodation that, all right, you pull up, you park your one car there, you charge it up for an hour, or however it's gonna take at that time, bring the other car up and you charge it there. Why do we need to have things at each curb?
I would not accept that as a solution for long-term for electric vehicles in this town. I mean, in my mind, there is no doubt that we are going to be like 100% electric vehicles at some point. And to have every resident that doesn't have a double-wide, you know, driveway or a large garage to park in, that have to be constantly shuffling their cars around, you know, that means we didn't plan for the future well.
Well, Nancy, you guys have a car. What's the charge last on a?
It'll last, he doesn't drive it all that much, but it'll last a week. So, I mean, he has a battery that lasts longer. Some of the batteries now are pretty short, so you're charging it more. Or they're like the combo EV gas, and they only go like, I don't know, 100. Some are really short, and you have to plug it in every night. But this whole cord thing, the snow issue is a big deal, but then, like, if you think about walking at night, like you're out walking your dog and somebody's dragged a cord into their car and you can't, you know, we have good streetlights thanks to the latest program, but they're not everywhere and it's not daytime. And so, to have cords hanging out is not gonna work. Brandon and I talked a little bit about this the other day, and surely the coasts where these vehicles are being sold more easily, I mean, it's hard to get one in St. Louis, so where they're being sold more readily, especially on the East Coast, there have to be neighborhoods that look like Brentwood that have done something. So I'd be really curious.
We've been researching that because we started this
Right, we
conversation with Mayor Dimmitt as well. And I think his concern is there's got to be some sort of design guidelines so that it's not just littered all through our right-of-way. Should it be brick encased, or what should it look like? So that was part of the discussion with Dan and Whitney. I don't know if it's reflected in this memo.
It isn't, yeah.
It isn't. So ultimately, there's still a little bit more research that we need to do before
Yeah, and that
we
was
bring
one of the other
something
things we
back.
talked about is where do you put it? Because, you know, we won't even allow an air conditioner on the side of a house if it's a brand new construction. So if they said, well, I'm not going to charge it in my garage, are you going to allow it to be on the side of the house or in the front of the house where everyone can see it?
Or you can't charge it in your garage. I mean, we have to be
Right.
pragmatic about the reality of
Yeah.
our houses.
There's no garage.
Yeah.
You know,
And
we
I
have a
know
lot
it's
of
real-
stuff
yeah.
that we put in our garages that aren't vehicles.
Right. Well, there is new technology. The only one I know that has it right now is BMW, where it's induction charging, just like the wireless chargers for your phone, but on a grander scale. So you would park, right now it's a BMW 5 Series. You would pull over it, and it's the induction that's charging it. There is no port to plug it in per se. They said that that's like less efficient. You can get like 94% charging from like a 1-foot air gap, which is still really good.
Crazy.
But the nice part is like all you have to do is line yourself up, park over it, inductionally charged it, put it in reverse, and then leave. And that, they think that would be the wave of the future for EVs, because people don't like getting out in the snow and rain and plugging it in. If you're at Schnucks, I know there's one in Ladue that you can plug into, but it's not covered. I don't know if you would require that somehow, like you were saying, it has to have some sort of covering or facade or screen or something. I don't know. We'll tackle that when we write the rest of it, I guess.
Jeff has his hand up. Jeff has his hand raised.
Yeah, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the dialogue and conversation, but I wonder if we're just, I mean, we're talking a lot about a future and hypotheticals, and I feel like we should probably let the market kind of determine. I just don't even know if we got that much of a demand at this point that we should be devoting this much time to trying to figure out a problem that really doesn't exist yet. I mean, so I mean that's just my concern is that I at this point I don't think I would want to have anything in the right of way like we see that in that photo with Maplewood. So until the critical mass of people that have electric vehicles that don't have access to a off-street parking that they can access, have it. I think we take it up at that point. Spending a whole lot of time having Dan do research and write an ordinance for something that proactively I think is just, I don't know that it's worth the time right now. Again, I appreciate the conversation, and to Alderman Waggy's point, maybe 10 years from now it'll be 100% EV, but 20 years ago we were probably thinking we're going to have flying cars by now. But so I think we don't know what's going to happen.
I mean, I would respectfully disagree in that, General Motors has already announced they will not make internal combustion cars after 2030. Right, they are going to be 100% electric vehicles, and other major car makers are going that direction as well. So I don't think it's a question of if electric vehicles are coming, it's just when. And I certainly agree with the, wait until it's a problem sometimes, but this is a thorny and hard issue, and it's going to take time. And so trying to be reactive when it becomes a problem can be much harder, and then spending some time and getting it right, in my opinion.
I would agree with that.
I'm going to take Jeff's side on this. I can see maybe taking a little bite out of the requiring in new construction in homes in the garage. But as far as dealing with at curb charging right now, I agree with Jeff.
So what do we do when people are throwing electric cords across the sidewalk?
How many incidents will that occur in? I can't see anything on my.
We take it up.
At my block.
We take it up then.
So the case in Maplewood, that resident, I talked to the former city manager, and he said that resident came up to talk to him. And because he doesn't have a garage, he spent all that money buying an electric vehicle. He thought that was a good compromise, and if he had others that made the request, he would have granted them that. So then it becomes that littered throughout the city in the public right-of-way. So the city could take it on a request basis, as it comes up and address it, or we could be proactive and come up with a solution, to address it if it ever happens. Right now, it would be prohibited.
I mean, I know we're divided too, but I'm totally with Brandon. I think as soon as EVs can go a few hundred miles, and people need a new car, they're gonna buy an EV. It is cheaper, it is easy, there's nothing to fix. Every time I stop at the gas station, I'm jealous of my husband because he doesn't have to stop at the gas station when it's freezing cold. I mean, they're coming, and as soon as my opinion is, as soon as, the Ford F-150 is going to be electric, and then you can plug in and charge your house and do stuff. I mean, they're coming, and I think this is, maybe this isn't a top priority project for Dan, but I'd say sometime in the next year, we should do this. It doesn't need to be done by next month, but I really think this is something that we need to get ahead of.
It's a tough problem.
Mm-hmm.
If the committee's in agreement, it could be on Dan's goals and objectives for 2022.
What if we had Suscom take a look at it and make a recommendation?
Would SUSCOM write the policy?
No, just make a recommendation of, potential pass forward on this? Because I hadn't thought about the snow. That's a big issue, but if we're requiring people to put a charging pole in their private property, then they're gonna throw the cord across the sidewalk, right? So they'll have no choice.
Are there people on Suscom who would be interested in like researching what's going on in other places and doing some of the work that?
That's a good question, or is Eric going to do it? Eric, where are you? Do you want to come up here?
It was my understanding earlier in the meeting, we directed staff to start doing exactly what we're talking about. So we're ready to start. I mean, as I said earlier, Whitney's ready to start working on this.
Yeah, that's for a new build, and I agree with that. I think this is for the
This
for
is
the
the-
not new build issues, right? And
But I think the idea is that we would be looking at that because of the already discussion that we had earlier and with this discussion. And I think staff would bring back their
Interrelated.
recommendation our recommendation for discussion at the Public Works Committee.
Give us a little time to kind of digest this. We'll bring something back.
I would also you may want to talk to some of the other utilities that have right-of-ways, easements, and.
Yeah. I mean, that was one of the things I thought too, because it's like, if you have a private charger, that's not gonna be on a dig right ticket, it's private. They only mark public utilities, so Ameren, Spire, AT&T, but if it's your drop to your house, that doesn't get marked, but it still needs to be hand dug, because you got a 240 volt cable that's either in a conduit or direct buried. I would hope it's in a conduit, because that's the other thing, it's like, how are these people putting them in? Is it just get a ditch witch and cut a trench and just drop it in and hope that nobody hits it? Or is it in some kind of protection, and is it concrete encased? I don't know, I think of a lot of things as an engineer. It's like, I don't like working around higher voltages without knowing that it's grounded properly, that I can disconnect it without, zapping myself.
I just know we got, like, in front of our house, we got the water line, we got the sewer line.
Right.
And I'm just saying, you may want to at least talk to them.
Right.
If they're going to allow this to be over there.
Well, yeah, because there could be a straight corrosion, issue if this isn't grounded properly. It's like, it's going to go to the path of least resistance if it's, a copper service or, I know most of them are going to plastic, but still, I know that Brentwood's an older community and there's a lot of copper lines in there for water. They used to let you ground your service box to your water line.
Okay, so we'll proceed with the EV readiness ordinance. I agree, that's a good first step, but
Right.
I think we should.
So we'll
This is a
draft
very
something for the next
complicated
meeting that
problem.
would be new construction and multifamily, and then Suscom will figure out, well, what about existing homes and how to, yeah.
We'll, Dan, Eric, and Whitney will provide an update.
All right, thanks, Dan.
Okay.
All right, we move on to item 8C. This is the driveway at 2430 Cecilia.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know if you had looked at the memo and kind of get a feel for the history here, but 2430, as well as the two homes to the south of that one that's at the corner of Litzinger and Cecilia, those were all built around the same vintage. Those are Kingbridge homes. And those were built, I believe, in 2004. So you got 2442, 2436, 2430. Then about a year or so later, there's a copy of the letter in there that Mr. Vandervoort provided. The city came in and they did some modifications of the roadway, which impacted the driveway slopes of the two newer homes that are there on Litzinger, not the corner home since it's on the west side of Cecilia as far as its driveway, but the two homes that are close to the corner that come off of Litzinger, as well as Mr. Vandervoort's at 2430. So those approaches were changed. They were ripped out, replaced, with a different slope. So whenever you look at the concrete conditions of 8534 Litzinger, the approach still looks fine. There might be a little bit of cracking, but very little in the 15 or so years it's been put down. 8530, again, it's about the same condition as its neighbor. But then 2430 Cecilia, the condition, it's starting to spall where the two joints come together on that approach. I'm not sure why it's deteriorating there, and there's a focus picture of it too at the end of the memo. So, Mr. Vandervoort's here, to discuss his side of it, but he would like the city to replace the approach. The approach for any driveway is not owned by the city. It's a means of ingress, egress to go across the public property, which would be the city's, to get to a private residence. I know that's the way Kevin O'Keefe explained it to me before. And like I said, usually we don't touch approaches unless we do a roadway project. So for example, Rosalie, when we do the sidewalk to meet ADA, there's a few approaches that we're going to have to change as part of the project. This was kind of a special case back then. The question becomes, do you want to do something to rectify this, or, I guess what's the warranty period? What's a reasonable warranty period? It's been put in roughly 15 years, it's deteriorating. What needs to be done now? I wasn't sure if there's an opinion by the committee. We can certainly bring it up to the city attorney, for a legal opinion, but right now it's a deteriorated driveway that a resident would like to see corrected.
Yeah, Jeff?
Just wanted to just let the committee know that due to a relation to the resident, I'm obligated to recuse myself from the discussion.
Great, thanks, Jeff. I mean, I'll start. 15 years is a long time, so I don't think that's indicative of a workmanship issue or anything. If it was 1 year, that's a different conversation. And the spalling, I think, is a typical thing that happens on driveways. I have spalling on my driveway, and the solution is to do the sealing. I think you mentioned that in your memo. I think we're way past any kind of warranty or responsibility for this completely. That's my opinion. Give me 1 second. Let's hear from the rest of the board.
Nothing at this time.
All right, come on up.
So you have a packet with photographs, I take it then? Did you take photographs?
I did, but there's one that's focused.
Okay.
One in your hand.
Yeah, so I say it's pretty clear from my perspective. I think nobody can disagree that there's a huge difference in the two driveways adjacent to my house that were poured at the same time, and the two on Litzinger that were poured at roughly the same time, same builder. I mean, does everybody agree that there is a pretty substantial difference in the photographs that you see? So what my case is that my apron was removed. We granted the city the permission to remove something that we owned as private property owners. As Dan mentioned, it's private property. There's a certain amount of trust that goes to allowing the city to do that, and the inconvenience that we had in the first place. Not a big deal, but we expect it to be replaced like for like. And concrete is the kind of thing where it takes a long time to see if it's been a quality job or not. It's almost like body work on a car. It might look great the first few weeks or months, but time tells what the quality is. And it's very clear in this case, now that we have the test of time, it's 100% clear to anybody, everybody in this room who has seen the photographs, that now the test of time is showing that what was put in to replace our high quality driveway was nowhere near that quality. The apron that we have now is younger than the driveways of all of our neighbors. Theirs, despite being at least 2 years older, look far better and show almost no evidence of degradation. I've got I'm an engineer, and a structural engineer, licensed engineer friend of mine. I had him look at it, and he said what it appears to him is that it was poured using a pea gravel mix, similar to what you buy in the bags at Menards or Lowe's or Home Depot. He said this is not typically what you should have in a driveway, and probably not what I originally had in my driveway. So I'm just saying, as a matter of trust and working with the city, I think it's clear to all that I was not given a like-for-like replacement, and I'm asking that the city just upholds whatever obligation or relationship that we have to replace it with something that's comparable. And I don't need it replaced this week, next month, even this year. I just want an agreement where, say, by the end of next year, if the city is replacing a roadway or something nearby, that they just, at that point, when it works schedule-wise, that they'll agree to replace that driveway apron, because this will only get worse and accelerate. I mean, we've seen it getting a lot worse very quickly. And I don't want this to me having to pay thousands of dollars to replace it myself when I had a good driveway before the city came in and replaced it.
Yeah, Nancy?
Well, from what I'm understanding, there were 3 driveways replaced at that time, and the other 2 look fine. And, I don't know what the conditions were, parking on it. I mean, I don't know any of that. I think the city built a driveway. It was 15 years ago. I don't see that this is the city's responsibility to do something on private property. I don't even know if that's allowed, just to go and repave something that is not in conjunction with a construction project. I would look to our city attorney for that, but I just see this opening up some huge can of worms that the city, all residents all over town expect us to pave their driveways or their walkways or, all sorts of different things.
Well, I'd say that I'm not convinced. I don't recall that the 2 driveways on Litzinger had been replaced. I know on the information I gave Dan, which was preliminary, it did mention how those, I think, may be replaced, but I don't think that they were. I believe that mine was the only driveway apron of the 5 that actually was replaced. And again, it's clear as a bell that this one driveway out of the 5 is substantially different.
I know we've, through the years, gone back, and there was a lot of drainage issues on different properties. I think, Boland, we've dealt with this before in Public Works, where the city had done work, and we had to go back and correct the problem, and this was on private property, because the city had done it originally, and then a waiver was signed that release the city from any further, once the repair is made, without, with any further liability for the work that's done to correct, in this case, this problem. I mean, well, let me ask you, sir, would you have any problem if the city were to come in and just cut that area out and replace, and put a seam in there, but replace that damaged area? Are you looking at the whole apron?
Well, I prefer not, because this area is just a snapshot of the worst area, but other areas on the whole apron are starting to do the very same thing. So that whole apron is of poor quality. It's just that it gets the worst effect right here at this corner. So my short answer would be no. Okay. And even for the city's cost issue, the labor in forming up concrete and so on, that's substantial, whether you do a small area or the whole thing. And like I say, I'm willing to wait until it suits a city's timetable. If they're nearby pouring sidewalks or a concrete roadway, I don't need this done anytime soon. I just want to have the assurances that the city will put back essentially the high quality driveway that I had.
And the city removed the old apron for this road construction?
Correct.
And was that apron all the way up to that first seam?
It is. It's maybe 10 feet or so up towards our house. You can't see that on the photographs that I have. I'm not sure the photographs that you're looking at, but yeah, it was the whole area up to the first seam approaching the house.
I'd make the motion that we replace that apron and have the homeowner sign a release that.
Okay, yeah, that's it.
They would sign a release that the city is no longer responsible after this repair is made.
It sounds reasonable to me.
Do I have to second before we have, I guess, do it before we have discussion? Or if we're in the middle of a motion, I can't ask a question, can I?
Yeah, if somebody wants to second that.
Well, I'll second it.
Okay.
So I guess my question's for Bola to ask our city attorney. I mean, from what Steve's implying, the city may have done this in the past, but this, I go back to, this just seems like a really dangerous precedent to set. So I'm wondering if we could ask for our city attorney to look at this situation and see what responsibility the city has legally.
We can do that.
And you can say on private property, but this is in the city's right of way.
And so is my driveway, and I have pockmarks, so should the city come fix mine? I mean,
Well, the city didn't put yours in. The city, he would not even be here if they hadn't changed this road bed and then taken out his old apron and put a new one in.
The danger is we don't know how many of this exist because that was a common practice back then.
But if it's the right thing to do, it's the right thing to do, right? We should divorce this from how many cases there are. Don't you agree? If it's the right thing to
I'm
do,
not
I
on
think
the
it's right thing to
committee.
do.
Mr. Vanderhort, thanks for your comments. Let us have the conversation about it. So you can go ahead and sit down while we have the conversation.
And
So, Steve, I don't know if we're thinking of the same example, but it was a sewer lateral install that caused a walkway and a stairway to collapse, the one I'm thinking about, that we did go back and fix. But, an engineer came in and an analysis was done that the improper packing of the soil had been done. So there was a latent defect in that install, if that's the same example you're thinking about.
no, this was, and Bola, you may remember.
That was one. There were others.
I'm not talking about sewer lateral. It
Yeah.
was some type of drainage system that had been put in by the city on Park Ridge or something like that. I'd have to go back and try to dig it
I
up.
think the safer bet is to allow us to talk to the city attorney, because I did ask Dan if he had talked to Kevin, and we hadn't. So I think to give me a better comfort level, we need to do that.
Okay.
Can I make a motion to table, or does that have to come from Steve? We don't have our city
We
attorney
could-
here.
No action is necessary. We'll just
Okay.
leave it on the agenda for the next meeting and bring it back.
Okay.
That's simple, unless you want to, I
I
mean,
just
there's
didn't
a
know if we needed to
vote
do a motion
already.
to table, because we have
You've already voted. Yeah, I think that would be best.
okay, so,
Yeah, I'll make a motion
Table.
to table to
yep,
the,
second.
Second?
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
All right, that brings us back to item 9, citizen comment. Anyone else? All right, looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right?
Thanks, everybody.